All right, Shabbos, good morning and a good moed. Let's begin. Beautiful daf today. So we're starting Pei Aleph Amud Aleph 81. So after we Baruch Hashem yesterday, we were able to get an incredible education about different types of cedars, 10 different types of cedars, Baruch Hashem. So along the same topic of trees, the Mishnah begins. The person goes ahead and acquires 2 trees within the field of his friend. So we've already seen this concept a number of times, that 2 trees by themselves does not constitute a field. As such, when you acquire 2 trees, all you acquire are the trees. You do not acquire any associated karka, any associated land with those trees. Rabbi Meir says, kana karka. Rabbi Meir, however, says, no, when you acquire 2 trees, you in fact do acquire the land with the tree. If you look at the Rashbam says, kana karka, first short line, the chashvilahu sada ilam. So we'll say, here's what everyone agrees with. Everyone agrees that essentially if you acquire a certain number of trees, then by definition it's called a field. And obviously if it's called a field, you acquire the land along with the trees. The shaila is, how many trees does one have to acquire in order to ultimately be called a field? So the Tanakama is going to say 3 or more. Rabbi Meir says even 2 or more, you acquire the associated land. Now, based on this previous statement, Higdilo, so going back to the case of where I purchased 2 trees. So I purchased 2 trees, therefore according to the Tanakama, all I've purchased are trees. I have not purchased surrounding area. Therefore, as a result, Higdilu, if the trees grow. Now the case over here, if you look at the Rashbam, Hirchivu ha'anafim harvest. So let's just play this out. I purchased 2 trees from Ruvain. According to the Tanakama, I only own trees. I do not own any associated land. So now that means essentially my trees are situated on Ruvain's land. Now what happens? My trees begin, Baruch Hashem, to grow. The branches begin to extend. So what's the halacha? Lo yishbeh. Ruvain, the owner of the land, does not have the right to cut back my branches. Now what's the logic behind that? Take a look at the Rashbam again. Lo yishbeh, lo yiktsos osan bala karka. So the owner of the karka, Ruvain, cannot cut back my branches. Afa pishat salra labeis hashalchin. Even though now my branches are shading his field, and that's not good. The chayvan de'in lo karka lebala ilanos hareshibe lo sadeu letzorach ilanos kol tzorchan shalmanas kinlocha. This is actually very interesting. What the Gemara is saying is like this. Now that we're taking the approach of the Tanakama, that the purchase of 2 trees does not entitle you to land. What that means is if I buy trees from Ruvain, it's understood that Ruvain yields some of the use of his land to support the use and growth of my trees. Therefore, if my trees extend, the branches extend, even though the extension of those branches creates shade upon Ruvain's field, which may be detrimental to Ruvain's field, Ruvain essentially yields the use of his field for my branches, and therefore he does not have the right to cut back my branches. Anything that grows from the trunk is mine, the purchaser of the trees. But anything that grows from the roots of the trees, belongs ultimately to Ruvain, the owner of the field. And if my trees die, low karka, then I will say I have no additional land. In other words, once the trees die, this is not a case where I only purchased 2 trees, therefore I don't own the surrounding land. Once the trees die, I do not have the right to replant any additional trees. However, kana shlosha, the Rebbe says going to the Tanakama, if I purchase 3 trees, then kana karka. Then ultimately, again, not only do I own trees, but what? I own surrounding land, and therefore, again, higdilo yishpa. I will say, interesting enough, because I own surrounding land, therefore Ruvain, the seller, has not yielded any rights in his land to me. And should my branches overgrow, right? Should my branches extend, Yishbeh, Ruvain has the right to cut them back. Va'ola min hageza min hasharashin shalo. And anything that comes ultimately again from the trunk or from the roots belongs to me, the purchaser of the trees, because I own the trees and the land. V'mesu, and therefore if the trees die, yesh lo karka. I own the land as well, and they have the right to replant additional trees there. So we'll say, what we're going to be focusing on today is the fundamental machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Meir as to how many trees do you have to purchase in order to also acquire surrounding land. So according to Tanakama, 3 trees. According to Rabbi Meir, even 2 trees. Well, it says the following. Tanan Hasam. So let's analyze this. Hakol Mishnah Elonos B'Soshal Chavero. So we'll say today we're going to focus a little bit on Bikurim. So what happens? I go ahead and I purchase 2 trees inside the field of my friend. So what's the halacha? Maybe ve'ino kore. So what's that? I have to go ahead. I have to bring bikurim. But ino kore means, we'll say there are 2 parts to the bikurim process. There is the actual bringing of the bikurim, and then there is the recitation. There are certain psukim that are read. What the Gemara is suggesting over here is the following: that if I only purchase 2 trees, I have an obligation to bring bikurim, but I have no obligation to make the recitation. Now, if you look at the Rashbam says ve'ino kore. We'll say we will see that part of that recitation includes we're Bikiyim now in this recitation, because remember, much of the Magid section is comprised of the psukim of Mikra Bikurim. So the Gemara says over here, because I've only acquired 2 trees, I have not acquired the surrounding land, and therefore I can't recite the psukim, because the psukim make reference to the fruits of the ground that you have given me, which indicates that the person who bringing the bikurim owns the real estate as well. But if I only purchase 2 trees, I own the trees, I have to bring the fruit, but I do not own the land. So I bring the bikurim, but I do not make the recitation. Rabbi Meir says, maybe the korim. Rabbi Meir says, no, you go ahead and you bring the bikurim, and what? And you also recite the psukim. Now, both say, now, bepashtos, what does this mean? This just seems to be an extension of Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah. Because Rabbi Meir said that when you purchase 2 trees, you what? You do also acquire the land surrounding the trees. So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Mechayiv Hayir Rabbi Meir, Af Belokeach Peros Min Ashok. So Rabbi Yehuda says the name of Shmuel, it's not true. This sheet of Rabbi Meir over here by Bikurim is separate and distinct by that which was expressed in the Mishnah, because Rabbi Meir holds that even if you purchase produce from the marketplace, you have to go ahead and bring bikurim, which Rabbi says is quite dramatic. So that's Rabbi Meir is saying that even if you clearly own no land at all, you still have to bring bikurim. So the Gemara says, Mimai, how do we know about the sheet of Rabbi Meir? Mediktani Mishnah Yisera. So Rabbi said, from the fact that the Gemara is bringing down an extra Mishnah. Now, so what the Gemara is suggesting over here is the following: that Rabbi Meir's shita is repetitive, and the repetition of the shita comes to teach me that according to Rabbi Meir, even if I purchased produce and I for sure don't own any land, I am still mechoyev to bring bikurim. We'll say, now where do we see the repetition? Watch this. Michti Tanale Diesh Lo Karka. So we'll say, so remember again, in our Mishnah, what's the takeaway message in our Mishnah? Takeaway message is that if you go ahead and you purchase 2 trees, according to Rabbi Meir, what do you get? You get karka. Okay, so we'll say, so if that's the case, pshita, then maybe v'korei. It is obvious that according to Rabbi Meir, if you were to purchase 2 trees, then of course you would bring bikurim, and you would recite the psukim as well. So I'll say, so if that's the case, then why is there a need to repeat another Mishnah that says, Hakoneshne ilanos beso shal chavero, Rabbi Meir Omer Moivi v'korei? I was going to say, I have 2 Mishnayos that are essentially teaching me the same things. Elish Mamina, rather that second Mishnah must be teaching me Mechayiv Hay Rabbi Meir Af Belokeach Peros Min Ashok. Rather, it must be that the point of that second Mishnah was what? That according, because again, from our Mishnah, I learned that even if you only purchase 2 trees, according to Rabbi Meir, you get land. So if you own the trees and you own the land, then it's pashut. That's what? That you bring the bikurim and you make the recitation. So therefore, Rabbi said this additional Mishnah, which is the Mishnah in Bikurim, must be coming to teach me something additional, which is that according to Rabbi Meir, even if I purchase produce just from the marketplace, I am mechuyev to go ahead and bring Bikurim from that fruit. But how could that be, Rabbi say? How could it be that you're telling me that if I just purchase produce from the shuk, that I'm obligated to bring Bikurim from that? V'haksiv asher tavi ma'artzecha. We'll say the pasuk by Bikurim says what? That you have to bring the first fruit from what? That you will bring from your land. So we'll say, so the pasuk clearly indicates that what? That you have to own land in order to bring Bikurim. To which the Gemara says, Lemeute admas akum. I will say that comes to exclude land owned by a Gentile. In other words, I have to bring Bikurim from land as long as it's Jewish-owned land. But I don't have to own the land. The fruit. I'm sorry, did I skip? Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. So we'll say, so that comes to exclude ultimately chutz la'aretz, to tell me that yes, according to Rabbi Meir, I don't have to own the land in order to go ahead and bring the Bikurim, but it has to be Eretz Yisrael dika fruit. If it's not from Eretz Yisrael, for some chutz la'aretz, there's no obligation of Bikurim. I b'haksiv ad mascha, but it says your land. Lemeute ad mas akum. And we'll say that comes to exclude the following situation, which is it can't be land that belongs to a Gentile. Now, what this is referring to over here is that even if it's Eretz Yisrael land, that's not enough. It has to be Eretz Yisrael land that's what? That's owned by a Jew. But if it's owned by a non-Jew, it would not be subject to the crime. So we'll see. This statement over here is the subject of much controversy about the status of Eretz Yisrael land that's owned by a non-Jew. This has major contemporary ramifications as well, just contemporarily for Shemitah purposes, because you know that the whole Yisod of Heter Mechira is based on the idea that if you sell land to a non-Jew, that land no longer has its Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. The entire Heter Mechira is predicated on that principle, or on that tenant. That tenant is disputed by many, which is why, according to many, Heter Mechira does not work at all. So the point, this Gemara is bringing it down over here by Bikurim. But the point the Gemara is making over here is that according to Rabbi Meir will say, you need not own land in order to be chayiv in produce, in order to be chayiv in Bikurim, as long as that produce is coming from A, from Eretz Yisrael, and B, land owned by a Jew in Eretz Yisrael. But listen to this. But the pasuk also said by Mikra Bikurim, by the Psukim that you read, it says that you're thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the land that you have given me. Listen to this. So the Gemara says, Diyahavis lizuze v'zabni buhu. It could also mean I'm thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the money that He has given me, because with that money, I can go ahead and purchase produce. Okay, so so far what we have over here is the sheet of Rabbi Meir. We're now expanding a little bit. So from our Mishnah, we learn that according to Rabbi Meir, even when you go ahead and you purchase 2 trees, you get land with those trees. So according to Rabbi Meir, it would be obvious that if I purchase 2 trees, that it would be chayiv to bring bikurim from those trees, and be chayiv ultimately to make the recitation. That's obvious. The Gemara now is saying is that the additional Mishnah and Bikurim is coming to teach me that what? That even if I just purchase produce, I'm chayiv to bring Bikurim from that purchased produce. What about all of these psukim that seem to indicate that land ownership is a prerequisite for Bikurim? So Rabbi Meir has his various drushas by each of those psukim. Fine. Masiv Rabbah. So Rabbah raised the kasha. Hakone ilan echad b'soch shel chaveiro. If a person goes and purchases 1 tree in the field of his friend, maybe ve'ino korei, so we'll say you have to bring Bikurim, but you don't recite the associated psukim. Div Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. Right? So what do you see from here? You see from here that according to Rabbi Meir, that alocha l'maisa, in a situation where you go ahead and where you don't have land ownership, you have to bring, but you do not recite the psukim. To which the Gemara says, Tiyufta. You're right. That is a good refutation of Shita Samir. In other words, we thought that Rabbi Meir was saying this entire time, that's what? That even if you don't own land, not only do you bring Bikurim, but you also make the recitation. It seems like that's not the case. This is according to Rabbi Meir, that Lamaisi you'll bring Bikurim, but ultimately, again, there will not be a Kriya. Amar li Reb Shimon ben Elyakim, Rabbi Eliezer, Amar li Reb Shimon ben Elyakim, Rabbi Elazar. So Reb Shimon ben Elyakim says to Rabbi Elazar, I'm a days. My time of Rabbi Meir be'ilan echad. My time of Dirabanan Bishnei Lano. So let's listen to this. So I have Rabbi Shimon ben Elyakim asking Rabbi Elazar the following kasha. What is the svara of Rabbi Meir be'ilan echad? So remember again, what did Rabbi Meir say about ilan echad? Rabbi Meir said, Mevi ve'eno korei. You bring Bikurim, but you do not make the associated recitations. You do not read the psukim. The Rabbanan and Rabbos, they hold the same thing by Shnei Ilanos. They will hold that if you purchase 2 trees and bring the fruit, you bring the Bikurim, but what? No associated Kriya. So Rabbi Elazar ben Elyakim, Reb Shimon ben Elyakim is asking Rabbi Elazar, what's the Svara? What's the logic of Rabbi Meir as to why he says that you bring bikurim but no recitation by ilan echad, and the Rabbanon say you bring bikurim but no recitation by shnei ilanos? What's that? Take a look at the Tap Rashbam. Hey, Aleph on the base. My tema to Rabbi Meir be ilan echad. Keivan de'eno korei mishum dechsiv asher tavi ma'artzecha lama mevi ha mehava nami memayid lekra. Both the Gemara is asking is the following: Why is it that in a situation where Rabbi Meir or the Rabbanon would not warrant a kriya, why would there be an obligation to bring bikurim altogether? That's the question the Gemara is making over here. But so here's what we've established. According to Meir, what we've established is the following: is that lamaisa, 2 or more trees, you'll bring bikurim, and there's a recitation, which makes sense. Why? Because lamaisa, again, you own the land. However, 1 tree, according to Rabbi Meir, or for that matter, 2 trees, according to the Rabbanon, we've established now that you don't own land. And therefore, again, the Gemara said that in those cases, you'll bring bikurim, but no recitation. To which the Gemara asks, I don't understand. If I don't have a recitation, that's because I don't own the land. If I don't own the land, then why would there be an obligation to bring bikurim altogether? So let's listen to this. So Rabbi Lazar says, Amar Lo, he says to Rabbi Shimon al Yokim, Davar Sharishonim Lo Amru Botan Tishalani Bebeis HaMedrash Kedei Levaishani, something that the earlier ones did not know a reason for. You ask me in the Beis Medrash in order to embarrass me? Whereas what Rabbi Lazar is saying is, Reb Shimon, you know that we don't know the answer to that kasha. So why are you asking me that question in the Beis Medrash in front of all of these people? Are you trying to embarrass me that I don't know the answer? Amar Rabba my kushya. So Rabbi says, I don't understand, why is it such a kasha? Dilma Rabbi Meir be'ilon echad sapuke misafkele. Maybe Rabbi Meir Abosai in the case of 1 tree. Maybe Rabbi Meir in the case of 1 tree is misupak. Right? Meaning maybe he just doesn't know what the status of that fruit is. And Rabbanon in the case of 2 trees are misupak. In other words, we'll say maybe any time that you say maybe ve'ino korei, that you bring bikurim but there's no recitation, that's why Rabbi was saying that is demonstrative of a doubt about the status of the fruit. So Rabbi Meir says in the case of 1 where I bought 1 tree, I'm a supak. Do I own land? Not own land. Therefore, I bring the bikurim, but I don't make the recitation. The Rabban, in the case of where I bought 2 trees, are masupak. Omi masapkile. But Rabbi say, is there any kind of suffix? V'hakatani lefi shelo kana karka div Rabbi Meir. Rabbi say the Brisa was quite explicit. The Brisa on Amud Aleph said that according to Rabbi Meir, if you purchase 1 tree, what's the halacha? You bring bikurim, but you don't make the recitation. Why not? Because the Rabbi Meir says you're not kanakarka, you don't acquire the land. So that doesn't seem to be a suffix. That seems to be quite a definitive statement. Ema shemalo kanakarka. Maybe what the Brisa really means, I will say, is what? That if I purchase 1 tree, I bring the bikurim, but I do not go ahead and recite the psukim. Why? Shemalo kanakarka. Because perhaps I did not acquire the land. So we'll say, so the Gemara says over here, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is the following: that in the case of 1 tree, according to Rabbi Meir, and a case of 2 trees, according to the Rabbanon, we're not sure about what the status of such a transaction is. In other words, we're not sure in halacha, in the purest objective form in halacha. According to Rabbi Meir, when you purchase 1 tree, we'll say, according to the Rabbanon, when you purchase 1 tree, it's clear that you get no land. Their suffix begins with 2 trees or more. I should say, well, it's not a suffix. Their suffix is with 2 trees. When you purchase 2 trees, do you associate them? Because according to Rabbanon, once you purchase 3, then what? Everyone agrees you get land. The Rabbanon suffix is 2 trees. Does 2 trees entitle you to land or not? Rabbi Meir's suffix is in 1 tree. Does 1 tree entitle? So therefore, again, because that's their suffix, in bikurim situations, you're going to bring the bikurim, but you will not make the associated declarations. So the Gemara says, but 1 second. Well, so we'll say, therefore, the way they resolve the suffix is how, according to Rabbi Meir, in the case of 1 tree, what will you do? You'll bring the bikurim, no recitation. According to the Rabbanon, in the case of 2 trees, you'll bring the bikurim, no recitation. But 1 second. But it's possible that what? Maybe this suffix fruit is not bikurim. But so you have a big issue over here. What's the big issue? That it's nice to say that out of suffix, you'll just bring the fruits as bikurim. There's one problem, which is that if you're wrong, and they're not bikurim, then what? You have brought in unconsecrated items into the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, which Rabbi say is profoundly problematic, to put it mildly. To which the Gemara says, Dimaktishlu. Now what's the case, Rabbi say? You consecrate the fruit. You consecrate the fruit. So you make the fruit hegdish, and therefore again that allows you to bring it into the Beis HaMikdash. But one second, if it's hegdish, v'ha by michlinhu. If it's hegdish, then what's Rabbi say? The Kohanim can't eat it. To which the Gemara says, Deparek lehu. What do you do, Rabbi? Say, here's what's amazing. You makdish it, that allows you to bring it into the Beis HaMikdash. Once it is in the Beis HaMikdash, what do? You redeem it, which means you deconsecrate it. You transfer the sanctity of the fruit onto money, give the money to the Beis HaMikdash. Now that the fruit is deconsecrated, it could be consumed by the Kohen, and even though it's deconsecrated, it could remain within the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. Deparklu. Ay v'dilma lav bikurim ninhu. Listen to this. Here's the issue. Bikurim, are tax exempt, so to speak. Right? Meaning, bikurim, you don't have to separate out Trumas and Maasros from it, which makes sense, because since it's already consecrated, you don't have to separate Trumas and Maasros. So here's the problem. You're taking this produce now, that is what? That is Safek. So now what we're saying is, you're going to be makdish it, bring it to the Beis HaMikdash. When it gets to the Beis HaMikdash, you're going to deconsecrate it. The Kohen will eat it. The money belongs to the Beis HaMikdash. But one second, by consecrating it, are you not potentially removing it from this? Are you not going ahead and removing it from the obligation of separating out Shumas and Maasros? To which the Gemara says, "Demaflish lahu." What's the case? In the case of Safek Bikurim, you know what you do? You separate out Shumas and Maasros. Separate out Shumas and Maasros. So let's analyze this. So meaning you cover your bases. So Bishlam Truma Gedola you have a Kohen. So I'll say, so under normal circumstances, if you're separating out Shumas and Maasros from this Bikurim, it's not a big deal. Why? Because for Truma Gedola, you could give it to the Kohen. Meiser Sheni, Nami Yoev Leila Kohen. I both say, Meiser Sheni, you also have the right, if you want, to give it to the Kohen. Right? Remember again, Meiser Sheni under normal circumstances is my property. I'm the owner of the produce. If I choose to give that over to the Kohen, I have the right to do that as well. So in this case of Safek Bikurim, I can cover my bases in the following way. I can separate out a portion as Truma Gedola, and it's fine, I can give it to the Kohen anyway. I can separate out a portion as Meiser Sheni, and I can give that to the Kohen as well. However, Meiser Ani, Nami Yohev Leila Kohen Ani. So I'll say, so to Meiser Ani, which is the portion given to the Ani, I'll make sure to only give this Safek Bikurim to a Kohen who's an Ani. So I'll say, so the point is, I could separate out all of these tithe amounts, cover my bases, and just simply give them to the Kohen. The problem I'm going to run into is where? Ela Meiser Rishon de Levihu Leman Yohev Le. Well, so the problem is, if I want to take this Safek Bikurim, I want to cover my bases by separating out Trumas and Maasros also. So by separating out Truma Gedola, not a problem. I give it to the Kohen. Meiser Sheni, give it to the Kohen. Meiser Ani, give it to the Kohen. But Meiser Rishon Rabosai is the property of who? Levi. So the problem is, if I separate out Meiser Rishon from this Safek Bikurim and I give it to the Levi, that's going to be problematic. Why? Because I'm potentially giving stuff that might be Bikurim to the Levi as well. To which the Gemara says, no, not a problem. The Yoav Leila Kohen. I both say in this case, you could give the Meiser Rishon to the Kohen as well. How so? Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, because Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah saying, this Sanya, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, or the Brisa says, Truma Gedola the Kohen. Truma Gedola goes to the Kohen. Meiser Rishon the Levi, Div Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva says that Meiser Rishon goes to the Levi. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah Omer, Meiser Rishon af le Kohen. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, no, you can even go ahead and give Meiser Rishon to the Kohen as well. But if you take a look at the Rashbam says over here, Meiser Rishon the Kohen, below the Levi, Kedim Mefarish Biksu v'Separaka Isha Shenes Amrlo, Umukila lebasar de kansinu Ezra. Shabbos. So remember, we've actually seen this before. That after Ezra brought up the remaining Jews, well, so when Ezra comes back to rebuild the second Beis HaMikdash, he gathers the exiles to come back to Eretz Yisrael. Everybody's represented except for one segment of the population, which was the Levium. Levium did not come back. As a result, Ezra knas them. Ezra fined them. What was the fine? He took away their Ma'aser Rishon, and he gave their Ma'aser Rishon ultimately to the Kohanim. So therefore, again, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Rabbosai, that in this case of Safek Bikurim, you could even give the Ma'aser Rishon to the Kohen. So therefore, Rabbosai, what we've done is, we've covered all of our bases. We've covered all our bases. So therefore, again, so let's just see trace this progression. This is a very specific case. According to Rabbi Meir, it's a case of one tree. According to the Rabbanan, it's the case of two trees. Where I'm not sure in these cases if I own the land or not. When there's a suffix of land ownership, there's a suffix if what? If you should bring bikurim at all. So what do? I bring the bikurim. So I'll say, how do I bring them? First, I makdish them. That's the first thing, I makdish them. That allows me to bring it into the Azara. Once I get into the Azara, what do? I redeem them. I'm paid to them. Money is transferred to the sanctuary. The Kohen eats the produce. What about all of the Truma Semaisers? It's not a problem. I can separate out Truma Gedola and just give that portion to that same Kohen. I can separate out Ma'aser Sheni, give it to the Kohen. Ma'aser Ani, give it to a poor Kohen. And even now Ma'aser Rishon, will align ourselves in this case like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and give him that portion as well. So the Gemara says 1 second. The Gemara says, V'dilma bikurim ninu ubo kriya. But 1 second. Remember, this is Safek bikurim. So maybe this produce is real bikurim. If it's real bikurim, then what's Rabbi saying? It requires a recitation. And you're not making a recitation over here because you're mesupak about the land ownership. So doesn't that lack of recitation of psukim ultimately undermine the bikurim? To which the Gemara answers, kriya lo ma'akeves. As much as you are supposed to do a recitation along with the bikurim, both said the kriya is not ma'akev, which means you're supposed to do it. But if you did not read the psukim when you brought the bikurim is still good. So is that true? That kriya is not ma'akev. Ha'amar Abizera. Kala roi lebila ain't bila ma'akeves bo. V'she'ino roi lebila bila ma'akeves bo. So let's listen to this. So I'll say this. We've had this statement many a time. This statement ultimately, again, is by the carbon mincha. The halacha by the mincha is the following: a mincha is made from flour and oil. Now, ideally, the mincha is supposed to be mixed. What happens if you didn't mix the mincha? So the Gemara, the klal is essentially, as long as the mincha is mixable, then mixing is not ma'akev. If the mincha is not mixable, then mixing is ma'akev. Now, by the way, when would a mincha not be mixable? If there's too much flour and oil in the kli, in the utensil, so that mixing it would what? Cause it to overflow over the sides, then again, that mincha is not good. Right? Then mixing is ma'akev. So we'll say, we generally use this as a principle to say that what? But essentially, as long as you can do something, even if you don't actually do it, you're fine. As long as what? As long as you could. Right? As long as you could. But if you couldn't, then non-performance is ma'akev. So the Gemara says over here like this. In this case, a suffix bikurim, right? Maybe it is bikurim, and therefore you should have to read the psukim. And since you're not reading the psukim, the bikurim is not good. The Gemara says, no. Reading is not ma'akev. Reading the psukim is not ma'akev. So the Gemara says, sure. Reading the psukim is not ma'akev when you could have done it. But if you can't do it, then the reading is ma'akev. So in this case over here, because you couldn't read the psukim, why couldn't you read the psukim? Because maybe this produce is what? Not bikurim. Therefore, I would say that the non-reading of the psukim ultimately again should be ma'akev. To which the Gemara says, but this is actually very interesting. Maybe ve'eno koreh. But listen to this. If I harvested my bikurim, but say, under normal circumstances, we would assume that most people would want to bring their own bikurim to the Beis HaMikdash. But let's say I couldn't, for whatever the reason. I harvested my produce, and I sent the produce with a shaliach. And then what happens, Rabbi Say? The shliach nebach dies on the way. I come and retrieve my produce and take it to Yerushalayim. What's the halacha under that circumstance? Maybe I bring the bikurim of the eno koreh, but I do not read the psukim. My time, what's the reason? D'chsev v'lakachta v'hevesa. Because the pasuk says, you shall take the bikurim and you shall bring them to Yerushalayim. Type of pay base. Ad shetei lekicha v'hava ke'echad v'haleka. What's the interesting gzeres hakasav? What's the interesting gzeres hakasav? That the only time you read the psukim is if it's the same person harvesting and bringing. But if it's not the same person harvesting and bringing, there is no kriya. Therefore, Rabbi said the Gemara suggests over here something quite fascinating. That in this particular case of Safek Bikurim, I have to be makbid to what? To send the Bikurim with someone else. Because if I send the Bikurim with someone else, then what? Then I obviate the need for kriya. Right? So what I do is I take advantage of a technical loophole in order to just sidestep the whole issue of kriya. I make sure that in the case of Safek Bikurim, I send the Bikurim with someone else. So let's just finish up another line. Amli Rav Achabre Rav Avi Rav Ashi Michti Psukim and Likri. I don't understand. What's the big deal about reading the Psukim? They're just Psukim. Just read it. Right? Just read it. Rosa Kekari Batorah. What is the big deal? Amrlei Mishum de Mechse Kishikra. Rosa it's an incredible musar. Why? Because it looks like you're lying. What does it mean Mechse Kishikra? What's the issue over here? The Mechse Kishikra will be in a case because the pasuk indicates that what the pasuk is in this recitation is the individual is thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the land that he has given him. And I will say, because I don't necessarily own the land, therefore what? It has the appearance ultimately of a sheker, of a falsehood. We keep the Rashbam for just a moment. Mechsek shikra, shai b'shul avas bikurim kakari, b'shema lav b'karko shalogidlo. We'll say, I'm thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for these fruits that have grown on my land, and maybe the land is not mine, become a shaker. And therefore I'd be lying. Ksiv, dover shkarim lo yikol leneged enai. Pasuk Etzilim says, he who speaks falsehoods will not be established before my eyes. Aval kishakori bator lo mechse kishikis. So let's listen to this. The idea over here is, in Yiddishkeit we believe that not only does a person have to obviously avoid lying, but I have to avoid things that are mechse kishikra. If it doesn't look right, what's the appearance of lying? In other words, it's an incredible yisod. Sometimes, we like to kind of gauge the appropriateness of our actions by, well, is it mutter or is it aser? Right? Is it kasher? Is it treif? Is it tamid tar? And sometimes something could be kasher, but it's still treif. And some things could still be tar, but it's still tameh. And something could be true, but it's still sheker. The idea that the Jew always has to live above board, that my actions have to be able to stand on their own, and not only should they not be objectively inappropriate, but they shouldn't look inappropriate either. So the act of bringing bikurim and reading psukim that seem to say that I own the land when I don't own the land is mechse keshikra. Furthermore, Meshar Amar Dilma Asilaf Kino Mitrumu Meiser. Both say the other issue over here is that we're concerned that if you go ahead and what? If you go ahead and you make the recitation, that a person may think that it's actual bikurim, and therefore may come to exempt this produce from Trumas and Maisrus, which Rabbi say would not be the case. Rabbi says, so we end off with a fundamental machlokes in Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanan, and here's what's fascinating. What began really as a machlokes just in general land ownership, right? Remember, we started with this with the Mishnah. General land ownership was the machlokes was, if you purchase 2 trees, all right, do you own the associated land with it? Rabbi Meir says yes. The Rabbanan say no. Ultimately, is nisgalgal into a machlokes regarding bikurim. So we'll say, so remember, what that would mean is by bikurim, Rabbi Meir would say, once you own 2 trees, you own the associated land, and therefore what? You bring bikurim, and you would recite the psukim. According to the Rabbanan, it's only once you own 3 trees do you own the land. Do you own land and make the recitation? Which I will say then means in what? In a case of 1 tree according to Rabbi Meir and 2 trees according to the Rabbanan, I will say those are cases where what? It's a suffix whether I own that land or not. Because it's a suffix, therefore what? I bring bikurim misafek. And when you bring bikurim misafek, I will say we see that you have to satisfy all of these possibilities. So first of all, when you bring bikurim misafek, then what? You bring, but there's no recitation. If possible, you would bring alsa shaliach, because therefore bringing alsa shaliach would obviate the need for the mikra bikurim. You still have to separate out trumas and maisrus from safek bikurim. What do you do with the trumas and maisrus? Well, again, truma gidol you can give to the kohen, meiser sheni you give to the kohen, same kohen, meiser ani give to the kohen, and we rely on the opinion of Elazar ben Azariah that what? Rely on the opinion of Elazar ben Azariah that you could even give meiser rishon to the kohen as well. Both say, bottom line is, take-home message is, just buy 3 trees. Just buy 3 trees. If you just buy 3 trees, right, then it's clear that you own all of the land. And if you own all of the land, then again, I will say, if the trees die, you could replant the trees. And also, you could just bring your bikurim benachos. Stop over here. Shkoyach.
I agree.